Hey Spuddies, Potato McWhiskey here, and welcome to my video showing you how to analyze start locations in Civilization VII. Those of you would be familiar with the video that I made for Civilization VI about, there's a lot of complexity about where you settle and all that sort of stuff in Civilization VI. Civilization VII is a little bit simpler. In Civilization VII, there's sort of three tiers of considerations. And the very first consideration you want to look at is fresh water. So if you come down here to the bottom left here and you turn on this lens toggle and you switch to the settler map mode, you can see these kind of bright blue tiles. These are +5 happiness tiles. That is what this means. And happiness is so incredibly important, not only for your capital city, but for every city, because if you get negative happiness, you start to take penalties. For every point of negative happiness that you have, you lose 2% of the yields in a city. So if you have -50 happiness in a city, it's technically 100% less yields. I haven't actually checked if there is a lower limit to negative happiness. I would assume that the negative impact of happiness only goes down to -70%. The reason that I would assume that is because the maximum happiness penalty from oversettling is -35. -35 times 2 is -70. But I haven't actually checked that. That's probably something I should dig into the files and do. But I'm still kind of in the phase of like, I'm just playing the game a lot and I'm trying to learn everything. So don't worry about that, right? The key takeaway is happiness is very, very important for a number of reasons. And the big thing you're looking for is there a tile that I can settle a freshwater city on? So that's the first thing. Then the second consideration is the type of terrain. It's a little bit harder to tell what your hills are in Civilization VII, but you will slowly over time, you'll get the vibe here. Now, we've discussed in previous videos how pottery plus saw pits are the most important two warehouse buildings. You're going to want to build these early. You want to get both of them early in your cities, but especially important, it's to get the brickyard and the masonry. Brickyard will give you +1 production on clay pits, mines and quarries, and then masonry will give you +1 production on mines and quarries. Mines and quarries are typically built on resources like iron, but also you see this kind of rocky terrain here, this rough grassland. These are your production tiles, okay? Now they don't look like they actually produce much production at the moment, but they will and they do produce production once you actually research both pottery, masonry, and you build the brickyard. We can show this off a little bit. So first consideration, just as a quick recap, you want to find fresh water, right? Settling on a river or next to lakes and stuff like that, or on wetlands. And then the second consideration is, where are my production tiles? And then the third consideration, especially for your capital, is where are my adjacencies? Now, there are 3 types of adjacencies in Civilization VII. There's resource adjacencies, there's mountain adjacencies, and there are water tile adjacencies. The most important adjacencies for you are resource adjacencies and wonder adjacencies. Wonder adjacencies is a really big, complicated topic that, we could talk about that for a long time. But for example, over here, right? We've got these 2 resources that are adjacent to each other, which means they're both boosting this tile with +1 production and +1 science each, which means buildings placed here have 2 adjacency. So in a perfect world, I would maybe want to build wonders around this tile and put production buildings or science buildings in here so that I could get a huge production boost, right? The way that adjacencies work is that they scale incredibly well in Civilization VII, especially the later the game goes, both in terms of turns and in terms of ages. The first important consideration is that the adjacency bonus of the buildings themselves, right? If we come in here and we look at the barracks here, and the barracks is unlocked pretty late, but you can see here, +1 production for each adjacent resource. That means a barracks placed here will get +2 adjacency. And then we have to talk about urban specialists. Now, urban specialists are gained in 2 ways in the Antiquity era. First of all, by researching currency. You can see here, +1 specialist limit in all cities. That's your urban specialists. And then the really important wonder is the Anchor Wat. This is one of the best wonders in the entire game because it lets you increase your specialist limit, which if you have built a really high production tile or really high science tile or really high any yield tile, you will be able to get an insane amount of production, because what urban specialists do is they multiply the adjacency bonuses of the tile that they are placed on. So if I have a tile with +2 adjacency bonus and I place a specialist there, they increase that by 50%. That's how they work. They increase it by 50%. So if I put two urban specialists on the same tile, they double the adjacency bonus of that tile. So that's just something I want you to consider. I want you to rumble that around in your head. You want to be, when you're settling your cities, you want to be thinking about, first of all, okay, let me get my fresh water. And then you're thinking, all right, where am I going to get my production? And then you want to think about, where am I going to get my specialists down for the giga yields, for those big yield tiles, right? Because that starts to become important both in the exploration era for your science legacy path, and also in the modern era for your, for just having really strong tiles. So, okay, now looking at this situation here, you also want to consider, can I move to freshwater without giving up a turn? Settling on the first turn with your founder is really good. And then there's also another consideration that I need you to think about in Civilization 7, which is that the developers have actually changed the way the spawning algorithm works. And they actually modify the map, typically, to try and give you the best start for your civ. It's not perfect, it doesn't always work, but they tend to try to give you a really good start. And we're playing Tecumseh and Greece. And I believe Tecumseh, we can go into start biases and stuff like that, but Greece is a really good pick because they always get lots of rough terrain near their start. And rough terrain, unsurprisingly, gives you extra production. So we're going to settle our founder in place. And the reason we're settling in place is because there's fresh water on this tile that's worth +5 happiness. We can actually demonstrate this. It requires a little bit, it actually requires us to go through 2 turns, but I'm going to settle on this tile here that does not have fresh water, okay? And the game will lie to you. It tells you that we have 5 happiness right now, okay? But I've been told that after the first turn, that happiness goes away. And you can see right there, now we have 0 happiness. So we are just down 5 happiness. And now astute observers will notice that you get -5 happiness in all settlements per settlement over the limit, okay? So settling all of your cities on fresh water is effectively like being able to settle an extra settlement. And that is really powerful. -5 happiness is like -10% yields in all cities. So if you can settle a 4th city without taking penalties, you're getting 25% more value at no penalty. Whereas if you were settling one and taking a penalty, you're getting 25% more cities, but you're losing 10% yields in all cities. So you end up being like, what is it? It would be 3.6 divided by 3 is you're only 20% better off. And so going 1 to 2 cities over your limit is actually totally fine. You can even go as high as 3, 4 cities over your limit if you're playing correctly around happiness. All right, so let's reload. This is obviously, we don't want to settle on a bad happiness tile. So we're going to go ahead and settle in place. Your first action, in my opinion, in almost every game, should be to get a scout. I think scouts are incredibly valuable. If we were to graph the value of a scout, right, a scout's value is higher the lower the turn number is. So the most value you're ever going to get a scout is from turn 1 when you build that scout. There are situations where I would maybe consider going for a hoplite, but turn 1, that's when you get the most value from a scout. Now, I'm not gonna bog down this tutorial with too much in the way of information about like early scouting patterns and all that sort of stuff. I've talked about that a lot. We're just going to skip ahead to when I'm getting ready to settle my next cities. But generally speaking, you want to scout away from the closest edge of the map with your first scout. So this scout, right, you can see if I scroll up here, you can kind of see in the fog of war here, you can see the way my cursor disappears. See the way, oh, and it's gone. That means that's the ice wall up there. So my first scout wants to scout away from there, because if I'm close to the ice wall, it's unlikely that someone is to the north of me, which means it's unlikely that they will compete for any of the goody huts up here, so I can delay scouting in that direction. I'm going to step forward 1 tile. It's good to explore 1 tile at a time. In Civilization 7, I don't always do it, but it's good to do. And since we have so much rough terrain, we're going to open with pottery. Now, my personal preference is a triple scout opening. I do actually think it's also okay to go for double scout 1 warrior / unique unit opening. I think that's perfectly fine. I would rather get that than the granary. I don't think granary openings are very good. In fact, I do think there are situations where the granary is quite good, in particular when you have a lot of resources in your city. that benefit from the granary that you want to grow to early, right? If you have a pasture, if you have plantations, then maybe an early granary isn't so bad. However, in this particular situation, we've got plenty of rough terrain to grow to. So that's what we're going to do. What we want to be looking for in this city is efficient food and production. So, for example, this rough desert over here is worth 2 production. This rough desert is worth 1 production. I really want to grow to this sheep because this tile is worth 1 food and 3 production. That's really damn good. Plus 2 happiness as well, right? We get our celebrations a little bit sooner. This dates tile is pretty good, but the amount of production down here is also really good. So I'm going to prioritize growing to, even though this is just a food tile, the sheep tile is so damn good that it's worth it to grow to a sort of quasi bad tile, because we can always bounce this with a building after we grow to the sheep to a better tile. One thing you want to look out for are scouts from independent people, and you want to be careful about whether or not they're friendly or aggressive. You can see here I found a friendly scout and it came from this direction, so I know that there is a high probability that there is a friendly independent people in this section of the Fog of War. And roughly every 2 to 3 turns, when you've got like a decent scouting spot, you want to tap the search function on your scouts to try to look for goody huts. Goody huts are like the big thing you're looking for in the early game, because goody huts give you a lot of tempo, and tempo is basically just describes how much stuff you have and how much stuff you're getting per turn. Think of tempo as like the acceleration of your empire. Your empire should always be accelerating because you want to go faster and faster. That's how you snowball. There we go, we found a hostile scout. That's important to note as well. Athenai is ready to grow, so I'm going to grow to the sheep. That's going to be 1 food, 3 production, and 2 happiness. Boom, we grow to the sheep, and then I'm going to immediately come in here. I'm going to plonk the granary down on this 1 food tile because I want to population bounce the tile. And by placing an urban district down there, I population bounce, and now I can grow towards the iron instead. You could also make an argument to grow towards the dates and the kaolin, as this would give my city extremely good growth to start working these production tiles really fast. This is like a style thing. I do think that because +1 production for your mines and quarries is locked behind masonry, rushing for rough tiles early isn't as super optimal as it can be to get a few early growth tiles and then population bounce back to your production tiles once you start getting the brickyard online. So I'm actually going to grow to, I don't want to grow to this tile because I don't want to put an urban district down here, as I want to put a wonder here to make this adjacency tile better. So I'm actually going to grow to this wood tile, and then I will eventually population bounce off of that back onto this. And I want to grow to these really strong food tiles so that I can get a lot of tempo, growth tempo, to grab all of these rough tiles for production. So let's grab this wreckage. We found the Scythian Neapolis. I can spend a turn of gold, 6 gold to get a hoplite, or 30 influence. 6 gold for a hoplite is insane, especially this early into the game, so I'm going to take that. And now with my new hoplite and my new scout, I'm going to be scouting more northernly in direction. So I'm going to send them off there to try and find more goody huts. And you can see my second hoplite is lining up with my pottery research. Okay, awesome. We found a cairn, and we're continuing to explore, looking for the edge of the map. Let's see if we can sneak past this independent peoples. We have been scouted by them, so they will send a raid to us eventually. Scythian Neapolis scout, so we know that this comes from this people. You always want to be hovering over the scouts to see which city, state, or independent people they are from. Oh, you could have got an early horseman. 20 food to the settlement. That's great. That'll shave a few turns off of the growth there. There's pottery. We get access to the brickyard. We get access to food on plantations, +1 production on clay pits. Doesn't do a huge amount for our city right now. That's fine. We're going to be researching animal husbandry because we want our second production building, and we also want the +1 production on camps and woodcutters, the food on pastures. Gets our early development tempo going. Take the excess food. That's awesome. Food and gold to Athenai. That's amazing. That actually triggered a growth event, which means I can do another population bounce. I'm going to grow to the dates. That's 4 food, 1 production, and 2 happiness. That's an incredible early tempo tile. Early food loses value very quickly, but the earlier into the game you can get food, the more value it has. And the same is not true for production. Production's value scales based off your science and culture, because production has to be used to build things. like cities, for example, but we can't build settlers yet. So production isn't as valuable as food until you hit about 5 population and actually have things to build. That's kind of an important concept that I think people need to keep in mind. We found another independent city-state. It's kind of a question, do we want to clear those? Clearing this cultural city-state would be worth 100 culture, so it's honestly not a bad move. Also, I decided to play this game without mementos, so that you can just see how a Civ plays without those. Here's a little technique that I will probably eventually do its own video, is the double population bounce. Now, I can't actually pop bounce this tile, and I would like to grow to the Cowl Inn, but if I place a granary here, and then I come in, now, because the game is like, oh, you're building there, you can put this anywhere you want. I put the brickyard on this woodcutter, so I can pop bounce it, and then I move the brickyard to the top of the queue, boom. And now I've created a second urban district, which the game normally doesn't allow you to do, but I've gotten away with it, and now I've triggered a second pop bounce. So this is a way that you can get over that restriction from the game, and now I can grow to this +5 food tile. And +5 food, this stage of the game, is incredible, right? We're just now the city's growth acceleration is really high, and that's about all the food we need. Even the granary has a lot of value now, right? But we definitely want production over the granary. We're going to grab ourselves the brickyard. We want production really early into this game. I'm going to attack the scout, and then we'll go to the next turn. I'm going to be scouting up north with my hoplite, and I'll scout down south this way with my scout. Mesa Verde, I believe that's a scientific independent people. You'll start to remember the different independent peoples and their designations from experience. So don't fret about that if you're not sure what one is which. We have met Ashoka, the world renouncer. Now, he came from the southeast, so we want to try to scout away from the southeast because it's likely he's already found all of the goody huts in that direction. And look, he has another scout to the northeast. So that tells me I actually want to scout down this way. You want to avoid other players' scouts, right? When if you see someone scouting in a direction similar to where you already are, that means it's unlikely you're going to find goody huts. And that's your main objective in the early game, is to find goody huts. Probably the first 15 to 20 turns, you're looking for goody huts. After that, you're trying to find settlement locations, because this is about when my city will hit 5 population, and it needs to reach 5 population to build settlers. I totally said I was going to skip ahead, and then I started over-explaining. But there's a lot of nuance that goes into Civ 7, and even I haven't perfectly mastered everything yet, and I still make mistakes, even though I've poured hundreds of hours into this game. Now, we're at a pretty critical juncture here. Altars are incredibly good, as is Priesthood with the +2 gold in all settlements. This is like so damn powerful. It's actually insane. Also, because we have the high production rough terrain here, stone circles is incredible for this city. So I think that kind of points me in the direction of Pantheon. And my personal preference is that I think Classical Republic is one of the best governments in the game. Culture and wonder production in the Antiquity is so damn strong. I can see an argument for despotism, however, and I can see an argument for oligarchy on certain civilizations. This is just, I don't think that this decision is very optimal, but this is very much so the style of play that I like. I like getting that 20% culture. I like getting the production towards wonders. I do think oligarchy is completely busted if you do the particular style that I'm going to be playing this game, so I'm going to go for oligarchy. Let's take the +2 culture on the palace. That's going to shave a lot of turns off of mysticism. Yeah, brought it down by 3 turns, which is great. And the sooner we get mysticism, the sooner we can secure the pantheon that we want. My scout got hit by a flood, so I'm going to pull him back to heal inside my territory, and Athenai is ready to grow. So now we want to start, because we're building the brickyard, we want to be conscious of the fact that all of the tiles that are boosted by the brickyard, right? Clay pits, mines, and quarries are going to get +1 production in a few turns. So this, 1 production tile is going to become a 2 production tile. And now we're at the phase of the game. We hit 5 population. Production's value has just started jumping. So we want to get production up. So we found like 3 or 4 city-state scouts so far already, even if we haven't actually found the city-states themselves. And the scouts tend to be near enough to the city-states to where you can kind of radar them out. Like there's Nukuleka as well. There's so many city-states. I'm going to heal this scout up because I don't want to lose him. There we go. We finished the brickyard, and that's giving us a nice boost of production on all of our production tiles. We could build the granary. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a settler. Settlers don't cost you growth in Civilization 7. And then once animal husbandry is finished, we will go back and grab this saw pit. We may not need to go for the saw pit. It might be better just to go settlers, but we'll kind of explore options here. I value, if I got the 25 science, no, I value culture really highly here. Getting your settlers out early is very, very important. 30 food for the capital, excellent. We've explored the northern area perfectly. So when you're planning your empire, one of the most important things that you're looking for is fresh water to settle on. So like I'm seeing like a nice fresh water over here. I'm seeing nice fresh water over here. The combination of these two settlements gives me a lot of value. Thinking like maybe I could settle next to the camels. Maybe I could settle here. Let's keep doing little radar scans. There's Nukaleka. Befriending a economic city-state is incredibly powerful. Economic city-states give you a resource that's worth +4 production. And it's ridiculous. It's so damn strong. So there's animal husbandry. We have access to the slinger, production on camps and woodcutters, food on pastures. So we're getting, even better food tempo in this city now. Not a huge amount better, but even better. And we want to be settling on freshwater because settling on freshwater lets us go over our settlement limit by 1 without suffering any real penalties. I do think in this particular situation, masonry first is always the play. And now it is a bit of a question. Do you want to get your settlements out early, or do you want to get the tempo, the culture and science tempo from building a saw pit, or indeed a granary here? I mean, that would be pretty good growth tempo, but the growth from the granary falls off really hard because your goal is going to be to grow your towns really, really fast and specialize them so they feed your capital. So in that respect, I do think getting the saw pit up could be pretty good here. It's +1 production per turn, which doesn't seem like much, but the +1 science, +1 culture from placing it on this tile would be really good. As the science and culture that's put on this tile actually boosts specialists that are put on your palace. It'll give any specialists put on the palace an extra half point of culture and science, which makes them that much more efficient. The question is, do I want to delay settling for another 4 turns? So be careful about building the granary. The granary is a little bit of a bait building. There are situations where it's okay. Like if you had a lot more, like if you don't have any rough terrain, sometimes you just got to get the granary. I'm a big fan of going for the saw pit. Mesa Verde, the scientific city-state's also a good target for early killing or befriending because they can give you free techs. All right, Athens has grown. We're going to grab the iron. That's going to be +1 combat strength on all of our infantry, as well as 3 production per turn, which gives us a huge amount of production. I can take food or production to Athenae. I'm going to take that production. Shaving turns off of buildings is really, really good early. Every ounce of production or food you can shove into your capital is a return on investment for that scout. I mean, that scout just refunded, right? The scout cost 30 production, so it basically just refunded half of its value by finding that. And it's also just generally generating value by exploring. Let's get our second settler. We're going to go ahead and settle Thebai. And sort of similar to how growth is really valuable in your capital city for the first 7 population, or for the first 5 population. In towns, growth is also quite valuable for the first 7 population, because you want to get to that point where you can specialize it and get that growth being exported to your capital, so your capital gets an insane amount of growth and gold and all that sort of stuff. In this situation though, I do really like the camels here. It's basically, this is a 3 gold tile +1 happiness as well. And I can put the camels in my capital, which will allow me to assign more resources there. The more resources you can assign to a city, the stronger the city will be. In this situation, since I do plan to be building my altar in the next little while, I think taking the production towards buildings is really good. The extra food would also give me a lot of growth tempo. I'm going to take the production towards buildings, and I'll grab tool making and get a hoplite or a bunch of gold. Well, hoplites only cost 120 gold, so I think 150 is just strictly better, because it means I can be a little bit greedier. Greed is good. I want you to remember that. When it comes to strategy games, greed is good. Greed that doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. There's priesthood, +2 gold in all settlements. We also have access to the altar, and we can found a pantheon. Priesthood is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. You're going to plug that in pretty much as soon as you start settling. I'm going to go for the Become a Suzerain of Independent Power. This quest is not that big deal. +1 production all settlements is actually disgustingly good though. Do keep that in mind, because that's permanent. There's a lot of value in killing independent peoples, so I'm going to go ahead and grab Discipline next. And we're going to go for the Stone Circles Pantheon for the +1 production on clay pits, mines, quarries. This is one of the best pantheons in the entire game. This is like pretty much your autopilot pantheon. So a tip about cities, or rather about towns. They are cheaper to convert to a city. But towns are like super omega giga really crazy powerful, so you don't necessarily want to convert everything to cities. Cities are awesome, but towns are crazy good too, especially if you're using specialists correctly. If you build a building in the city hall tile, it actually makes it cheaper to convert a city. I don't want to show you that, because what I actually want to do is purchase the altar in Athenae to get tempo. as I'm really close to being able to afford it. It's 360 gold. I can show you that. If you have 360 gold by the time the altar becomes available, you're kicking ass. Friendly greeting with Himiko. I think befriending Mesa Verde is not the worst thing. They are really close, so I'd probably prefer to clear them. +1 science on science buildings is really damn good. I think clearing them is worth more though, because of the commander experience. It depends though. If somebody else tries to befriend them, then it's a problem. Plus I want to put a city over there, so yeah, I'll kill them. Now hindsight 2020, I should have gone for the food buff. A little bit of a mistake on my part. I'm going to go settle up here on freshwater again, because we want to maintain that high happiness. I'm coming into Atheni. I'm going to purchase an altar. Since the altar doesn't really have many adjacency bonuses, it doesn't really matter where you put it. But we can do something sneaky. We can put it right here, get 3 production, and then I can lay the granary down on top of it for another +1 science, +1 culture. And that is a significant bonus, even though it will slow down my settling a little. That's fine. Not very important to what I'm trying to show here. Of course, there would be a quadrireme there. I have to send my settler around. We're up to 20 production in Atheni on turn 31. That's pretty good tempo on standard speed. We are going to want to buy more units. It might even be worth it for me to recruit a hoplite or a couple of slingers before I get the settler out, because they're going to be delaying me regardless, so I just need more units to deal with this. Early slingers are great because they do damage without taking damage. Yeah, this is exactly the kind of crap that I hate to see. So the first couple of tiles in your towns, it's good to get a little bit of food. It's also good to grow towards resources. You can see here there's a nice fish tile, so I'm going to grow towards that fish tile. +3 food. It's going to help me grow both my capital and my other cities, or indeed any cities and towns, because fish can be moved around. Believe it or not, fish can be moved. Local festival is extremely powerful to receive, because +3 happiness per turn in your cities basically lets you settle another city over your limit while it's active. So that's why Tecumseh, if you're getting the benefit here, it helps a lot. So because I have 17 happiness in my capital, and my capital is the city where the happiness matters the most, I can actually settle 3 cities over my limit without taking penalties. So I can settle to 6 cities here. That's why freshwater is a big deal, as are these things. And now I can settle 4 cities over my limit without taking penalties, which is amazing, right? That's the power of the early shrine. It's also why you want to rush down to entertainment to get both the Colosseum and rites and rituals. That +2 happiness and quarters in this settlement lets you just settle so crazy. So we're 1 turn away from getting masonry. We have 20 production in Atheni. The turn should roll over, and we'll end up with a significant boost here in a moment. So there's +1 production on mines and quarries, which is the main reason that we researched this. Slingers are slinging away. Take the culture because we want to get discipline a turn sooner. Now it is a question, do you want to get masonry too, or do you want to rush for currency? And currency lets you get specialists, which are incredibly powerful. I think it's worth it here to consider going maybe riding 2 and straight to currency. Want to start thinking about maybe do we want to get a wonder? Do we want to rush for hanging gardens? 10% growth rate in all cities is insane. Also settlement limit, really, really strong. It means we can get even more towns out. We can spam even more settlers. Yeah, I think this is a pretty good example of the early game. Let's run through another example. I'm just going to go with random civs. Okay, so we're playing Harriet Tubman as the Egyptian Empire. And while your individual civ choice is going to modify your early game, it's not going to modify your early game by that much. Especially when you get a spawn like this, right? This is a atypical Egypt spawn, which means we're going to want to play it in an atypical way. So again, we take out the settler map mode. Oh, man, this is the only happiness tile right here. And look at that. We do not have much in the way of rough terrain, so we're going to have to approach this slightly differently. We do have 3 mining tiles on our resources, which still makes the quarry viable, because that's 1, 2, 3 production there, which ain't bad. But we're going to have to kind of think a little bit more carefully. I think settling in place makes the most sense. There's no need to go to the water. You could make the argument of going for the coastal. But yeah, scout first, as per usual. We don't have particularly good science tiles. I guess there's a couple of good science tiles that also compete for food adjacency up here. In this particular game situation, I would favor going for animal husbandry first for the +1 production on camps and woodcutters. That will give me a lot of really good early game tempo. And then I would go for pottery. So it just depends. Do you have more woods or do you have more rough terrain? That's going to dictate which of those you get first. Salt has a lot of food on it. Remember, food has a lot of value before we hit population 5. So I want to grow to the salt first. 45 science is insane. I'll take that 50 damage. That's like 4.5 turns of science in the early game. That's crazy good. We found 2 scouts, one from Karl Supe and one from Khotan. So we know there are 2 hostile city-states in the nearby area. Grab the cairn and take the chunk of gold. The caged bird. So I would call, like, pretty much every start in Civilization 7 is pretty decent if you know what you're doing. We don't want to do a population bounce yet. So I'm going to grab myself another scout. Part of the reason I like to get so many scouts early is so that I can do my population bounces. We're going to grow to the salt. It also gives a 20% production boost towards units, which I believe applies to anything in the unit category. So salt is not terrible at all for production. Basically, this number gets multiplied by 0.2 and added. So we're actually getting 7.2 production right now towards things, which is pretty damn good. There's Khotan. And now it's safe to do a population bounce with our saw pit. So let me just quickly bounce this pop. Boom. And then we're going to grow towards the jade. 15% gold is not bad. Also has a little bit of food on it. Remember, food has a lot of value until we hit population 5. And then the value of food drops off a cliff. And production becomes king. Mysticism, it's basically my preference. You can argue for discipline. I like mysticism early. I also think oligarchy is a really strong thing again. Always take the culture, in my opinion, so that you get your mysticism a few turns sooner. Shaves 3 turns off it, which is crazy. There are situations where you won't, but it's just like my general vibe. So, what's that? I'm going to get started on the saw pit. There's nothing else I can really build in here. We're waiting for the pop to grow again. And if we take a look, we can see, oh look, wow, fresh water is pretty rare over here. So we might have to settle some minimum distance cities. And minimum distance cities suck in Civ 7. That might have actually pushed me towards discipline if I had checked that first. In fact, I probably will switch to discipline and take a more militaristic approach because we need to kill some of these city-states to free up better city locations. I think you really want to avoid settling minimum distance cities if you can. It's fine, but it's not optimal. It's fine, but it's not optimal. That's what I want you to take away there. But yeah, so you can kind of see how this strategy is really, really reliable. The second we get pottery, we're going to get +1 production on this mine. We're going to get +1 production on this mine. Sorry, yeah, clay pits. Sorry, the second we get the brickyard, we'll get +1 production here, +1 production here. I'm going to, once I grow to this jade, I'm going to do the double building bounce to bounce this pop over towards this jade so that I can get the production tile. And then I will start looking, okay, like maybe do I want to grow to my pearls? Do I want to grow to my dyes? There's a lot of happiness in this city actually, so we'll be able to go heavily over our settlement limit without really having an issue. But yeah, hopefully this has given you a little bit of insight on how to settle your cities, how to settle your starting city, how to consider like, all right, these are my science tiles, I don't really have culture tiles, I have water tiles, so I'm gonna have to think about like, where do I put my wonder? Like maybe I put a wonder here so this becomes a +3 tile. Maybe I just ignore this resource adjacency and I key off of this one and I just build a bunch of wonders down here to try and get my, like if I put a wonder here, I can put a science building here, production building here. Yeah, it's all about, the antiquity is all about getting as many towns and cities out as you can. Ideally, you want to try to get to 9 in a perfect world so that you can get the +2 settlement limit for the transition to the exploration age. But yeah, think about it, right? Settling your early cities in Civilization 7, it's all about, can I get fresh water? What tiles can I work nearby? And where am I putting my buildings? I want to thank you guys very much for watching. I love you all very much and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!